So, what have we got for you today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on day 2 of the revelations about Del Boy Trotter actor David Jason's secret daughter, which is a fascinating read. It did not splash on the untimely death announced overnight of TV legend and national hero Paul O'Grady, because it came a little bit too late for the paper. But it's dominating the news this morning, so we're going to talk about it anyway. Now, Kevin, Paul's only 67. I think it's far, far too young to die. But there's one achievement I think is almost remarkable. I think pretty much unique to him. I don't know of anybody who's got a single bad word to say about him.
No, nor do I. He had a very big, generous heart, and he was an incredibly genuine man. And yeah, he was really, really, really funny as Lily Savage, as a talk show host, the eponymous Paul O'Grady show. He was also incredibly generous with people. Countless stories of them trying to help people and turn up on their doorsteps with Christmas presents when their kids had nothing. There was one story, you remember our colleague Sue Carroll, who sadly died just over a decade ago of cancer, big friend of Paul O'Grady's, and Sue really cared how she looked, and as she was being ravaged by cancer and having chemo, and she was in hospital and looking not quite her best. He turned up and he knew she was really down. So he said, "So I've seen you far worse in the past." To just laugh, and he cheered her up. But he also was a fantastic campaigner, as you say, not just for dogs, but for people. Yes, certainly in the gay community, and he was working very closely with Peter Tatchell, the human rights campaigner, to get a police apology for a terrible raid on the Vauxhall Tavern, a pub, and a venue show.
He was there that night.
Yeah, 1987. Yeah, and he said, he was going to appear as Lily Savage. And all these cops burst in. At first, he thought they were part of the show, and they were strippers. But then it turned out not to be, and they had because it was in the idea.
He tried to rip the trousers off.
I know there was a lot of bigotry around HIV at the time, and so the coppers all had plastic, rubber gloves on. So O'Grady said, "Well, you've come to help to do the washing up, have you?" Just trying to get through it with humour, but no, they were campaigning. To get an apology. I hope it's now posthumously delivered.
Yeah, no, we've had so many comments that come up on the screen there, which won't work for podcasts, but, Lorraine says she's devastated, Emma Samways and others, and Margaret, such sad news about Paul O'Grady, because it wasn't just, like you said, everything he said and did seemed to strike a chord somewhere. And because if you put on paper what Paul O'Grady stood for, his how passionate he was in his political beliefs, having seen, Paul says, such sad news, rest in peace, Paul. The things that he saw in Merseyside under Thatcher made him really politically quite definite and definitive about what he thought of Margaret Thatcher and so on. He was very passionate about his support for gay rights because, as you say, he was there in the Royal Vauxhall Tavern. He was a patron of the Peter Tatchell Foundation. You put some of that stuff on paper and you'd think you'd have a really, I don't want to say binary, but a really kind of a person people either loved or hated, that was very extreme somehow in their beliefs. But when you saw Paul, how he talked about it, it was just a matter of simple humanism, wasn't it? He struck a chord with people in life.
That's right. He related to people, and he was very relatable. And his head he's never turned by his considerable success. He never forgot where he came from. And some people suffered more hardship and were less fortunate than him. He was a social worker at one point in Camden and just saw some terrible things, including kids with scabies. And a couple of years ago for the Mirror, we had a Christmas appeal to raise funds for kids who would go without. And I had to interview him and spoke to him. And I posed the question. In some ways, it was unfair. Which do you think is most important, saving dogs or saving children? Because of course he's so linked to Battersea Dogs and Cat Home and his show on TV, winning all those awards over dogs. And he said, well, but you don't really have to choose between the two, which he was right about. But he said, look, you can't be sentimental. And if it's a case of a starving dog or a starving child, of course it's the starving child. Of course it is. And then he was recounting what he saw as a social worker, and he knew the suffering there. Yeah. It was, it's all in his background. It was all in his earlier years, but he just never forgot, and it motivated him. That was it. He lived his ideals and his values.
Yeah,
I think that's so important.
Well, more tributes there from our viewers. Elaine says, Paul, loved everything you did on TV and your love of animals. I think it was Shirley was the last comment as well, another tribute from her. So, I mean, he didn't sort of... The one thing about Paul as well is that when you broke through into sort of the mainstream and the big time, when he was on BBC and he was on ITV and stuff, if you want to get those gigs, you do need to sometimes, I think Gary Lineker has recently proven, need to watch what you're saying. Yeah. And be a bit more vanilla, be a bit more mainstream. And he never ever did wind his neck in, did he? He always stuck it out for people.
Yeah, he'd always smile, he'd always laugh. He had that Scouse accent. He'd dress it up as being a bit cheeky sometimes as a bit of a joke. But he made very important political points. They're all valid. He was taking a side, and he was taking the side of the people who need looking after and need helping. And I just thought that was absolutely terrific. And he did it every day. And in some ways, he didn't shout about it. He just did it. And he did it with his usual goodwill and humour. And that's, you and I can be pretty acerbic as journalists. He can, but he knew how to try and win over people and disarm his opponents and try and charm them. As well, but he wasn't going to give an inch. He knew right from wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Caroline, there, another tribute. Thank you, everyone, for giving us your thoughts about Paul, because it wasn't just as well that his activism, as you said, Kevin. He also did an awful lot for Battersea Dogs Home. He highlighted the stories of so many animals that were in trouble there. And if you had weren't interested in some of his views on other things, the fact that he was so determined to help those dogs, and the cats, of course, that there as well, I think warmed, everyone else's cockles of their hearts. But we can't just finish talking about Paul without mentioning the alter ego Lily Savage, who I've got to say, I think is one of the most beautiful women I've probably ever seen. Mike says here, I remember him presenting The Big Breakfast as Lily Savage. It was 2 hours of live TV, daily in drag, trying not to swear. That in itself must have been a huge risk to take for the bosses of Breakfast TV.
Yeah, he was a very handsome man, Grady. And Richard Arnold on Good Morning Britain told how he used to be a front of house at a venue, and he knew he was going to have Lily Savage on, but he'd never seen Paul O'Grady as anything but Lily Savage. And this bloke just came up to him to chat, and he said, I was just struck how handsome it was, and I realised it was Paul O'Grady. Yes,
Lily Savage. Well, Lily had an absolutely cracking pair of pins. I was always jealous of them. And when Lily did one of those sneers to the audience, it was beautiful. And the one thing that I really, there's obviously many things to regret about Paul passing so early. Angela says, he's a hero to all divas and animals. We sadly miss. There'll never be another Paul O'Grady. The fact is that it's such a pity we didn't have the right to host Eurovision any sooner than this year, and he's not going to be around for it. Although he retired Lily a little while ago, I've always thought if we ever got Eurovision, Lily would be the perfect compare, the best possible demonstration to the rest of the world what Britain is and what it stands for.
I know. There'd be some people who would otherwise complain, but no, they're not going to have a go at Paul O'Grady as Lily Savage. He would just charm and win him over. Can you imagine it also being up in Scousland, his home region?
Oh, good Lord!
Crowning glory.
It would have been absolutely beautiful. I think even Russia would have. Did Russia get to vote in Eurovision these days? Yeah, they do, don't they? Even Russia would have voted for.
We elbowed them out.
Lily Savage.
Are they allowed to compete?
I don't know if they're coming this year, but they do take part. I think they may have perhaps been blackballed slightly. I can't remember what happened last year even, because I know obviously Ukraine won. I don't know. Well, I can't recall. I'm not enough of a Eurovision fan because Lily Savage was never on it. That's why.
I'm sure we'll be corrected and there'll be somebody watching who will know.
in the comments, do let us know if Russia's in or out this year, or what happened last year, because we can't remember. We're too old and addled, and I didn't get enough sleep last night.